So welcome to our next podcast in our series. I think we've got over 30 podcasts that we've done, Bill. And I'm Mark Edmonds, sitting here with my fellow podcaster, Bill Winter. Afternoon, Bill.
Hello, Mark. And yes, this is our second one for the day.
Second one for the day. Glorious sunny day.
That's right. And we've branched out and we've actually gone to sunny Ipswich in Queensland.
And we're testing the technology that we have, and it seems to be working fine. So let's see how we go. So on the line with us today is Peter McMahon. Tell us about Peter, Bill.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Peter, by the way. Good to connect with you.
Thank you.
Good. Well, Peter and I go back quite a way, actually. I was trying to work it out. I think we probably first met in the late 60s or early 70s, sometime like that. Because by coincidence, our fathers or our parents owned soft drink companies. And we had one here in Victoria, and Peter's father had McMahon soft drinks in Ipswich, which is a famous name, certainly around that area. And over the course of the journey, as we all know, things have changed, and we've been through all sorts of issues since the 1970s. And right now, Peter is the owner of the Peter McMahon Learn to Swim centres, or I think, Peter, officially they're called the Swim Factory. Is that correct?
Correct. We call the Swim Factory Australia. We're expanding.
Oh, good. What? Well, we'll get you a passport and you'll get over the border. You'll be right. No, but...
they do allow me into Victoria sometimes.
Well, that's right. Just as an aside... Peter has joined, is it called the Shark Bait Club down in Lorne?
Yes, at Lorne. I've done my 20th theatre pub race at Lorne, which was my old surf club when I was in Melbourne, which will get to my background of having spent some time in that great city of Melbourne.
That's right. Anyway, you've had a lifelong history with sport and swimming over the years, and when circumstances came about and you and your brother assumed the ownership and the management of the soft drink company, it actually morphed into much bigger things where you got to a point where it was time to change direction. And that's why you are now, I guess, running these swim centres, and you've got two on the go in Ipswich, and I know they're very successful, and that the focus really is on teaching people to swim, which is such an important part of it.
So, Peter, where did your journey begin?
Well, I was born in Ipswich.
So, Queenslander through and through.
And to make it worse, my goal is to die in Ipswich, but not this week if I can help it. No, I was a war baby. My parents were the local soft drink manufacturer, which in those days there was a number of them, which is a bit of a long, more than 20-minute type talk about myself. I went to primary school into the local Christian Brothers. Then I in grade 7, I went on to a place called Nudgee College, which is a rather famous Christian Brothers sporting school, very famous for its rugby students. But my speciality was swimming. Scholastically, was so-so, but on the swimming world, that was my special. I just always had a natural ability to swim well. In 1960, I trialled for the Rome Olympics, and for anyone that doesn't know when the Rome Olympics was, it was in 1960. A lot of people don't know that, I went to, but I didn't get to Rome. However, and my speciality was butterfly. Go back to Nudgee College. After that, I went to the University of Queensland. I got a commerce degree, and after that, or during it, I actually started work with a company called Arthur Anderson Co., who were one of the big four in that era. They don't exist anymore now, but we had a year in the Brisbane office, and then I went on to Melbourne and had 2 years down there. I found that it wasn't my cup of tea as regards because in those days we started as auditors, and it wasn't my world. But I then thought that I go overseas. I spent 2 years in London, but all the time my father was nagging me to come back and join the business, which in itself, the Bill Winters and I learned and accepted that was the way of life. I would never propose that to any of my children. From my point of view, they go out and find their own feet, and if they wish to come and join me, they can. But that's not as though it's something that I reflect on, but it's the way of life that took place in those days. So I came home from London in 1968 and joined the family firm. Like Bill's business in Geelong, we were very powerful in the local area. We did something quite different to a lot of other people, but in those days, home delivery was an accepted way of life. We expanded into the 70s, into Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, and we became the second largest home delivery operator. But we also were involved in servicing the local corner store, hotels, sporting activities. So we actually sold to Ipswich. And that was a conflict at times. Some retailers, the shopkeepers, and remember in that era, the corner store was very significant, that we would selling drinks to the shop and then delivering across the road in opposition to them. But we got away with it.
So, Peter, from that background in soft drinks, and that was quite a while ago for both of us, I guess, is that what was the issue that made you gut out the old soft drink factory and put a swim centre in the middle of it?
Well, I suppose just one little section, Bill, of my life was in 1974. We had 5.5 meters of water through our back warehouse.
Yep.
And the result of that, we ended up, through the help of the state government, build a new facility at our local industrial estate. So the old factory became just a warehouse. And at the end, we had sort of got into bed with a national company, which I finally made a decision I'd break away in 1989. We adventurously went into a brewery making brewed soft drinks as well as cider. And the GFC had come in, and after our market research telling us great, it was a dud. We had the best product you could ever have, but no bugger wanted to buy it. So we really had to close it down, virtually fearful of losing everything, but we got ourselves out of that problem. But then Sir Peter McMahon was 48, had a commerce degree. They had a use-by date of 15 years, and I applied for jobs and I couldn't get one. So I sort of used to swim with a good friend, and he said, "Oh, you should get in to learn to swim." And I did it for 12 months, for a summer at my family pool, where I learned I could communicate with kids. And then the decision was made to open up in the old warehouse, which was known as the old factory, and we changed it to the swim factory. We celebrate 30 years this year that we've been there, and people ask how many kids we put through, but we'd have to put in between 50 to 70,000 kids over the time, which from babies right through to adults, but the main area of teaching is from babies through to about the age of 7 or 8. 8 years ago, we expanded into an eastern section of Ipswich called Springfield, which is a massive growth area.
Yep.
And we have a specialized swim school where the old factory was just a warehouse with above ground pool. It's very functional, not quite the most modern in its own way, but it's functional. And then Springfield has opened up, and we currently are doing something in the order of about 2,000 kids a week through that. It's quite enormous.
So Peter, if how long have you been running the swim schools for?
It's 30 years.
30 years. So if we went back 40 years, did you ever envision that that's where it would be? So Bill and I often talk about tipping points and sliding door moments where you go one way and do another, and you've had that obviously with the floods.
We go back to your 40 years, 40, 45, maybe 60. When we moved to Wulkuraka, we had great ambitions because I shall add one thing. In the early 70s, the world changed outside. What was the corner store, firstly in our local area, Woolworths opened a certain suburb, Coles opened up at another warehouse. Also, the women went back to work because in those days, earlier days, anyone in the public service had, if they got pregnant, they had to, well, no, they got married. They had to sort of go finish up their job. They all started going back to work. And on top of that, AGCs of the world came along and people were able to buy more cars.
Yep.
So people were a lot more mobile and therefore they were far more attracted to go to the likes of Woolworths, Coles, Jack the Slasher, Franklin's, you name it. And what was our original market was drying up. And so at the new soft drink factory, we went into canning, into one-way packaging. But then suddenly you were competing directly against the big boys, Coke, Schweppes, and so on. And we were highly undercapitalized, and was always hand to mouth. And if you sort of identify that 40 years, we did relatively well, but in hindsight, it wasn't the future.
Yep.
And by the end of the 80s, we were tied up with a company which sort of was probably the third biggest manufacturer, but had sort of a very questionable reputation, and I just wanted out.
Yep.
Well, Peter, Mark, you've branched into other things, and I know swimming's still in your blood. And we mentioned the pier to pub before, and you try and make it down here every year. But I also know that you do a number of ocean swims around the world, and you've swum in ocean competition in many countries everywhere. So outside of work, what's your involvement in swimming now, personally?
This morning was Rotary. Yesterday morning I did 2K. The body's got slower, but to just guide a bit, I've done ocean swims. I've done the Alcatraz swim in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
I've done a swim called the Dauphin de Monte Cristo, which is in Marseille. You swim from an island. If you've ever read the Count of Monte Cristo, he was in prison, an island called Chateau d'If. And it's a 5K ocean swim. I've done the Dardanelles swim, which is just on the other point of where Gallipoli is.
Yep.
That's a 6.4K swim. There is a bit of cheating in that because the Bosphorus flows down from Black Sea, probably with a few Russian submarines, and the current is quite good. So it's 6.4K, but you swim across and you get in the current and it propels you along. I've done another swim in Italy called the Coppa Byron swim. Reportedly, Lord Byron did it back in the mid-80s, 1850, something. I think it's bullshit. But it was 7.5K. That's the furthest I ever swam, 7.5K.
So in these ocean swims, Peter, you're on your own with your thoughts. What do you think about? What's your focus? What do you think to motivate yourself?
No, well, actually, can I just talk about the Italian swim? This is the Coppa Byron. When you're in Europe in summertime, France, Italy, you can buy buckets of mussels, and I suddenly found, as I was swimming across, there was a big groin about 2K long and had all these ropes down. And it was where the mussels were growing. So they probably impregnate this rope. So I had 2K of observing mussels grow. To go back to, so I have to say, swimming probably is the most boring sport if you really think about it. All you're doing is following the black line. How do I occupy time? Firstly, you're counting laps. But secondly, I've been attempting to learn French for the last 50 years. I will never get a job in the diplomatic service. So it is sort of where I sort of tried to do vocabulary of just in French. So you just got to take your mind somewhere else. But you've still got to be conscious of where you're swimming, particularly in ocean swimming, because you don't have the black line.
Yep.
And you're just putting your head up to concentrate that you're on a straight line to wherever you're swimming to.
You do have black sharks, right? You can count them as they go by.
No, you grab them by the teeth and throw them away.
Listen, I know that we spoke about floods before, and I know your soft drink company has got some famous photos in the press in Queensland because it was devastated and soft drink crates and pellets floating down the river. But you also suffered, in recent times, you suffered from floods again when your whole swim factory was inundated.
We've had two occasions. 2011, we had 3.5 meters through the place. Our floods are river water. All floods are river water. That's silly. But the river, that was really devastating because that put us out for about 2 weeks. But just recently in February, we had 1 meter of water through our place. I repeat, I said we have above ground pools, so we're fortunate none of the water got into there. But we've got a bit of experience where the river flooding, you got at least a 6-hour warning of when it's coming. And I made the call on the Saturday morning. We were lucky enough to get a truck with a container on, and we had all this staff because Saturday morning's our busiest day. We had no customers coming in because they were more sensibly staying home. And we just evacuated our premises as much as we can, computers, desks, whatever, within 2 hours. The subsequent effect was that obviously the buildings, and we only just, the toilets, change rooms, offices, and so on, we can't protect them. And that sort of put us back for about a week of trading. But the one good thing about this particular flood was the water didn't come direct from the river, it came under the storm water drains.
Wow.
And so there was virtually no mud and no debris. And if you go back to Bill to the 74 flood, the one thing that you just remember is the stench of the smell of the mud. The stench is just terrible.
And Peter, as lots of businesses in a similar situation around Ipswich or Lismore in New South Wales, etc. How do you go about? Have you got insurance? Are you insured, or is it just so astronomical?
I do not. I'm with the most lucky people. I'm talking about this year. In the 2011 flood, we didn't have any insurance, but this one rang our broker. Yes, you're fully covered for flood, and excess of $250.
Wow.
It's I don't believe they put our postcode into the computer.
Just wait for the renewal next year, but let's not go there.
No. Well, to help you out, because this case hasn't been finalised, that'll be next year. This year, we still are currently no flood. We've still got flood cover.
Yeah, that's and did COVID affect you too, Peter? With a
yes, that really as regards our day-to-day business, probably not as bad as you guys down your end, but we were closed for about 5 months. And all we have to say is thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for JobKeeper.
Yep.
Was our saving grace plus some capital contribution. We and it also enabled us to keep our staff around. I mean, sure, we would have lost a few, and they came in and helped us with cleaning up. There was an opportunity to do lots of maintenance work.
Yep.
There was a few that didn't comply, so they're just not with us anymore. but and financially, we probably came off better as regards to government funding. But in the next breath, it is not the way you run a business. That's all.
Exactly right. And how are you going for staffing at the moment, Peter? There's lots of cries that everything's hard.
Can I just say that as of this morning, we're doing well. We do have a HR lady who is recruiting, but our type of staffing is more secondary grade 11, grade 12 kids dash uni students, and we seem to be able to pick the right people, because the uni students, we very, very fortunate to have them. They come along as young people. 90% of my staff are females, by the way, which is another subject in its own right. But they do so much for us, and we do so much for them. The worst part is at the end of 3 to 4 years, when they get their piece of paper, they leave us, and we end up with having to start again.
Yep.
But one great thing that I have to say, that I would have at least 15 staff that are working for me that I've had for over 10 years.
Wow.
Would have at least, I have one that's started with me 30 years ago. Had 3 others, 20, and a number of them are 15 years. So we're very, that's very unique, I consider. Now, not all our staff are full-time. They're on a casual basis. Same as the uni students, we work around their terms. So we're probably accommodating. But, you know, our pays, we're averaging $30 an hour. Which we consider is pretty good in the general casual way. They're all got to be qualified. You know, they have to sort of get an OSWIM equivalent. They've got to have their blue card, CPR, and so on. So, you know, they do have to have a standard and also be trained by us.
Yep. All right, Peter, going forward now for, say, in the next 2 years, what do you believe are your biggest frustrations in running a two-setter swim business?
Okay. Well, firstly, Bill, by this time, let's say this time next year, we'll have 3 more new swim schools. Wow. So we do have some ambition. I am very fortunate. I have a quality general manager who is also a shareholder. And we're very fortunate because there is a massive growth occurring in our local area. Our city has grown from, say, 180,000 10 or 4 years ago. We're probably at about 280 now. We're going to about 400,000 within the next sort of 10, 15 years. So the opportunity of sort of satisfying what we do, and the great thing about growth is generally the young people. By the way, there's lots of people coming from Victoria up here because the price of housing is relatively cheap.
Yeah, well, we're not quite there yet, but we'll let you know, because I'll do my instructor training and I know where to go for a job. Right now, Peter, just
Bill Winters, can you swim first?
I think I can. Look, before we wind up, I just want to make another comment. Mark, part of Peter's background is his heavy involvement in Rotary at a very high level, and as chair of the local hospice in Ipswich. I think you've been chair for too long, from what I read.
Yes.
But
no, well, I'm out of it now. So,
but for all of those efforts, I congratulate you on being awarded an OAM for all that work you've done in giving back to your local community.
That's brilliant. I didn't know that.
Yep.
So, Peter, thank you very much for your time today.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, please.
Because for more Bill's involvement, we got out of the soft drink game 30 years ago. There's a gentleman outside of Toowoomba rang me one day to say, "Do you want any soft drinks, mate?" He's a local little tiny soft drink. I said, "Go away." However, our brand, the same as Noddy's would be in Geelong, we have had the last 3 years, a run of our two flavors, sarsaparilla and a thing called anything. And for hospice, we've raised over something like about $80,000. We've sold it it's only a Christmas sort of run, and we've sold it at a premium price, and all the profits go towards hospice. So I feel very proud of putting that together. We've probably got about 1 or 2 years to go, and it might fade.
That's
So
fantastic.
that's my last story.
So thank you very much, Peter. I've really enjoyed listening to your story, and who would have thought there's a connection between soft drink and swim schools? But there you go. You've developed it and made it work. So.
Exactly. But I as Bill and I have talked time and time again, we used to walk up and down alley aisles of Woolworths and Coles checking prices. I don't go near the soft drink stores anymore.
So wish you all the best for the future. Thank you for your time today.
And thank you, Peter. Great talking to you, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.